Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Paranormal Tapes, where we play back stories of the strange, the scary, and the supernatural. I'm your host, Ryan Reed. If you're new to the show, basically, this is an audio-based program where I interview people who are close to me, who have had all kinds of experiences with the paranormal and the supernatural, and this is just a way to get all their stories on record. And tonight's guest is none other than my own mom, Tamara Reed. My mom is an incredibly kind person. She's always been super supportive of me and whatever I decide to do. She also runs an animal rescue facility, which she'll talk about a little bit at the end of the show, so stay tuned for that. As for her paranormal stories, she has all kinds. Some of them lean towards the creepy side of things, while others are more heartwarming, but all of them are very interesting. So without further ado, let's jump in to the paranormal tapes. So what was like the first ghost story or like supernatural story you ever experienced in your life?
Well, I think I had a few spiritual encounters when I was younger, but as a young adult and child, you don't actually always know that that's what it is.
Mhm.
But where we started having something like paranormal experiences was when I moved out to a very old home in Knightson, California. And there were three old homes set on 10 acres. And we later found out that it was one of the homes was the original post office when the town of Knightson had developed. And I lived in the largest home on the property. And it was a cool old home, but it kind of had a strange setup. You walked in the door, there was the kitchen. To the left, there was to the right, there was one bedroom and then a super long hallway that had a bathroom at the end. And to the left of the kitchen, there was an open living room. And then it had a little bedroom off the left to that, and it had a master bedroom off the right. So from the living room, you had two doors that would go into separate bedrooms. And we owned dogs at the time. It was your dad and I and my brother Sean that all lived there. And we would just have, things would get misplaced or go missing. And you think, well, that's just normal. People are forgettive. They don't know where they put a piece of paper or an important document.
Right.
But it seemed to happen a lot more in that house. And being that it was an open floor plan, it was kind of hard to figure out, well, how did I just lose that?
Right.
So it would start off where everybody'd like be at rest at night, maybe sitting, chilling, watching TV or something like that. And then all of a sudden the dogs would like jump up from being asleep on the floor and they would just start barking. And they'd always bark at this one corner. And we just think, that's really weird. A corner up in the ceiling, the dogs would just bark.
Right.
And then we started having other experiences, like you'd feel like a cold draft literally, pass through you, or the room would just get really cold all of a sudden and then dissipate. So when we started thinking it may be ghosts was we would literally be sitting there and one of the doors to the front bedroom would open. You'd feel a cold draft and it would go like across the room, and then the door to the master bedroom would open. I mean, right there in front, just in front of your eyes. And so it's like, okay, that's really strange. You'd get up, you'd check the windows. Was any window open? Could a cold breeze have caused that? And things like that. But that was never the case. And that would happen more times than not. And a lot of times it would start with the dogs barking, but not always. But we'd always make sure that we'd close those doors. And then it just kind of got, as a habit. We'd close the doors to see, is the ghost going to come visit tonight?
Right.
later on, we found out, like I said originally, that was the old post office. And we found out that one of the workers at the post office had actually hung herself in the big oak tree that sat out in front of our property.
Oh, geez. And was this, so it was like 1800s or early 1900s when like Knightson was established?
I think it was like the late 1800s.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So this is so she was one of the like original people that worked there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know the reason why she had hung herself or anything like that. I never really found out that history.
Mm-hmm.
But it just kind of all made sense afterwards. Like, okay, so this is the spirit of the house. It was never anything that made me feel like I was in danger or that I was scared. Mm-hmm. It was in a way, it was kind of a more of a comforting feeling, you know, okay, we're just being visited by the ghost tonight, and nothing ever, like dishes didn't go flying or
right. It wasn't like a poltergeist. It was just like
exactly, yeah, it was just an essence. Mm-hmm. And we just learned I lived there for about a year. Mm-hmm. And just kind of learned to accept it. And you know,
sorry. Go ahead.
The dogs accepted it, we accepted it, and just, you know, that was just kind of the way that it was.
Right. Now, when you were researching it, or like, how did someone tell you like the story, or did you guys like go to a library and research it, or how did you find out the history of the place?
No, I believe we were talking to somebody. It may have been our neighbors at the time because mm-hmm. of the other two little houses that were on the property. Mm-hmm. And one of our neighbors had, you know, lived in Knightson their whole entire life. And so I think we were telling them, you know, hey, we're just having these, you know, weird things. Are any of you guys experiencing it? And none of them were, but that is when we found out the history. They said, well, you know, this, you know, it was actually the little house that they lived in was the post office, mm-hmm. but the other buildings were always on the property. So I don't know if ours may have been like a little general store or something like that since it was the biggest home. Right. But they said that, that somebody had hung themselves out there in the tree.
Wow. Does that
was that like a huge oak tree, uh-huh. you know, old oak tree that sat directly right in front of that house. And so we just always assumed that it must have been that spirit.
Does that house still exist? Do you know?
So the house, I believe, exists. When we still lived in the area, they tore down the little homes, mm-hmm. and then I believe they either refurbished the big one. I don't think they tore it down and totally rebuilt it, but I do know that they did remodel it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I know it was on Delta Road, but I just can't remember the actual numerical address of it.
Gotcha.
But it was on Delta Road in between Sellers and Main Street.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, was the next house you guys moved into the Bethel Island house, or was there something in between that?
Nope, it was the Bethel Island house. Mm-hmm. So, after living in Knightson for about a year, Grandma's original house in Bethel Island, Dad's mom, mm-hmm. Was available to rent. So we decided, to move in there. It was a bigger home and less expensive, and we would be there to help Grandma and Grandpa because they lived in the mobile home behind the shop on the property. Mm-hmm. And so we lived there, and we lived there for a couple of years, and it was pretty evident shortly after we moved there. We don't know if that particular spirit followed us, mm-hmm. but we definitely had spirits in the house. Mm-hmm. The spiritual encounters became more prominent after you kids were born. So Nick, of course, only lived in the home for about a month. Mm-hmm. We were living there when he was born, but then we moved to Oakley about a month afterwards. But you obviously were born, well, we lived there and spent the first 2 years of your life there.
Mm.
So, the strange things that would happen there are you actually used to talk to the ghosts.
Uh-huh.
And, as a toddler, um, the older you got, you became a little bit more verbal and could explain things a little bit. But we did have, strange encounters with you.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I remember distinctly, there was an old light in that living room that was attached to the wall, and it was a vintage light that was in copper. And in order to turn that light on, it had a little key switch. So the switch actually looked like a key, and you would just turn that key, and the light would go on and off. And many times in the evening, again, we'd be sitting in the living room in the evening, relaxing, and we would normally, that light was kind of in the hallway, so it wasn't one that you would, keep on constantly.
Right.
But I remember distinctly one night, you had fallen asleep, Dad had fallen asleep, and was sitting there watching TV, and that light, you could hear it because it would do a little clicking when you would turn the key. And I started to hear the little clicking, and all of a sudden the light would go on.
Mm-hmm.
And that one, it would usually stay on until you'd go and turn it off yourself. But then you could get up, turn it off, and a little while later it would click and turn itself back on.
And so to be clear, it's literally like almost like the end of a key, basically.
Exactly.
You were saying. So
Yeah,
and that and
old
so
like a skeleton key looking,
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so did you have to turn it like a quarter turn, or was it like a halfway turn, or how much did you have to turn the key
It
to
was
actually
like a half turn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And you'd turn it to the right to turn it on, and then like a half to the left to turn it off. But it always, like I said, when you did it, it always made like a little clicking noise.
right. And it's not even something that could theoretically move on its own. It's like
No. Yeah. It literally, I mean, you had to, I mean, it's not like it was super hard to turn, but you did have
Right.
to physically turn it.
Right.
Right. And so then when you were younger, this was before Nick was born, and the way that house was set up, because it had had additions over time, the living room and one bedroom was on one side of the house, and then you actually walked through a little door, and then they had a huge room opposite that door, that at that time, when I think the addition was always there by the time Grandma had moved there, because she moved there when Dad was 7.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just a huge room, and that was known as the boys' room because they'd set up all the beds for the boys, and that's where they slept when they were little. That was their bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
But when we lived there, we actually had it fixed up as your room with a giant playroom. We actually had a play structure in there, like one of those outdoor play structures inside the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it had low windows, which was kind of weird. Like it would have like maybe the wall was only up about 3 feet, and then it had like big picture windows throughout that room.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I remember one day you were in there playing, and I was in the kitchen, like preparing a meal or something like that. And I heard you talking, and the TV wasn't on, and you were like carrying on a conversation, as like a 2-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went in there and I said, Ryan, who are you talking to? I'm talking to Grandpa. And I'm all, you are? Well, Grandma and Grandpa aren't here. They went down to Taft for the weekend. And, or maybe they'd either gone down to Taft or up at the cabin.
Mm-hmm.
And you're all, I'm talking to Grandpa. So I thought, well, maybe they came home early. And so I went outside and I went to the trailer that they normally um, live at, and nobody was home. Their car wasn't there. I actually called Grandma and Grandpa, and they were still, it was the cabin now that I remember. And they were still up at the cabin. And I'm like, okay, that was weird. And so then I'd asked you, I said, Ryan, I said, where was Grandpa when you were talking to him? And you're all, he was on the other side of the window out on the deck. And he'd poke his head up and talk to me.
Mhm.
And so I thought, which, Grandpa did used to tease you and do things like that. But
Mhm.
so I thought, well, maybe it might have been uh, maybe uh, grandma or grandpa's dad who had passed away. I thought maybe, he had looked a lot like him and that sort of thing. So I
Mhm.
didn't know. Um, both grandma and grandpa's um, grandparents had come to that house priorly to visit. But I mean, I never knew, but you were convinced. You were talking to grandpa, and he was on the other side of the window, and he kept poking his head up and talking to you.
Now, and I don't want to jump ahead too much because I know we still have more stories for Bethel Island, but obviously, Grandpa, Dad's dad did pass away a few years later. Have you ever thought maybe it was him, like a time loop thing? Like maybe it was Grandpa coming to visit from
It
after he
could,
had
I
passed?
mean, I didn't think of that at that time, but that
Mhm.
definitely could have been,
Mhm.
a foreshadowing or whatever of the future,
Mhm.
letting him know that, he was going to always be watching over you or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, Another experience you had was you used to have a habit of like falling asleep on the couch at night, and then I would carry you to the bedroom. Sometimes you'd wake up as I was doing that, sometimes you wouldn't. And I remember one night I had you in my arms and I was carrying you, and you just kind of had your head rested on my shoulder. And when we got to that one doorway that I told you about that separated the kitchen from your big bedroom at that time.
Mhm.
I had turned around to say something to your dad. And so your face was facing that door. And all of a sudden, you just picked your head up and you literally stuck your arm out and pointed and you said, Ghost. And it's like, it was like one of those type of things. It's like, do I turn around or do I
Right.
not turn around? So I kind of slowly turned around and I didn't see anything. And again, you just pointed your finger and you said ghost.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking to myself, how does a 2-year-old even really know what a ghost is?
Right.
And
Had,
I don't know that we'd had like verbal conversations, about ghosts or things like that. And I just went, okay,
right. I was gonna. Well, that was my next question. Was I didn't know if you and Dad had like talked about it, but like obviously I saw something, and they do say kids are more
but
like open
yeah.
to ghosts and the paranormal and stuff. So
And
uh,
again, it was nothing, it didn't frighten you. We never felt like evil spirits in the house, but you could just feel like there were spirits watching over you, or we would have these strange things happen. And we used to tease and say they followed us from Bethel Island, but I mean from Knightson.
mhm.
But I honestly don't know if that is the fact or not. Um,
Did Grandma and Grandpa ever have experiences there? Did they ever talk about anything that happened, or was it just when we
I
moved in?
believe asking them, and I don't recall them saying that they did. And Dad doesn't remember as a kid having like those type of things. But with 6 kids living in the house, I guess weird things could have happened that they would not have even noticed.
Noticed, right?
Um, but yeah, it was, uh, and again, every once in a while, we'd feel like the cold like flow through a room. But that house was not very insulated very well. So you could always just think, okay, yeah, that could just be a breeze coming through, one of the
Right.
cracks around the windows or something like that.
Now, would is it Bethel Island or Knightson or both that the cabinets and stuff would open?
We would have things like, yeah, you'd have a cabinet door ajar and things like that in Bethel Island. But again, you can't always, did I leave that cabinet door open? You always kind of second guess yourself.
Right.
But one thing I know 100%, I mean, I visually saw the key turn. And then the other one of our weirdest encounters was when I was leaving to go to work one morning. And I used to go out, and I had a van at the time because you kids were little. So this was just this happened in that short time that Nick was born.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to take you guys to work with me in the morning. So I had turned the van on to warm it up. And then I would get everything ready, and then we would go out to the car, and I would usually put my purse and stuff in there first, and then I would carry Nick, and you'd hold my hand and we'd walk out there. Well, I'd opened up the sliding door, and I got you guys all buckled in your car seats, and I was walking around the van to get into the driver's side, and the van in the back seat had these windows that would just like open halfway, like a wing window,
Mm-hmm.
would.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had these little latches, so you could just prop them open. Well, all of a sudden, both the windows on both sides started opening and closing, like flying open and closing as I was walking around the van. And it's like, okay, the way that your seats were situated, there's no way that you guys could reach to open those. You were just a little over 2. Nick was an infant.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why I thought this, but I went running to the front of the car thinking to myself, oh my God, there's like an animal in the car or something.
Right.
And then I get in there, and there's like nothing in there. You guys are just sitting there. And I'm like, okay, holy crap. That basically, I just watched my windows open and close like, 5 times.
Right.
And it was just like they were trying to fly open and close, but they couldn't, because it had that little latch. It could only open so far.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got in the car, I mean, the first thing that entered my mind after that, when I realized there was nothing in the car, for whatever reason, my Grandma Annie came to mind. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's not normally something Grandma Annie would do, but we used to play jokes on her all the time as kids. So maybe she was doing that to get back at me, but or maybe I was Grandma Annie's spirit came to me, like, again, I'm watching over you or something, don't worry, right. Everything's fine. But that one was pretty weird.
Well, yeah, I would say that's definitely the strangest when, I mean, obviously it's you can't explain the key and some of the other events, but that's definitely one where it's truly unexplainable. Just watching windows fly open.
Exactly. And like I said, it was like 5 or 6 times. Literally they were doing it until I entered the car.
Right.
And yeah, that one freaked me out a little bit. I mean, again, like I said, nothing bad. I didn't feel like all of a sudden like this heavy weight or like a dark entity or anything like that. I never felt that. It was just like somebody was trying to get my attention about something.
Right.
So again, whether that was a, foreshadowing or something like you better drive safe or whatever, I don't know. But, those were like the weirdest things that happened there. And again, we would just, kind of think, okay, I guess the spirits followed us and they're watching over us and they're just kind of letting us know that, they're there.
Right. Well, and oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and that pretty much happened the whole time we were in Bethel Island. Now, I did ask Uncle Sean, because Uncle Sean lived with us in Bethel Island for a while. And then after we moved out, he moved in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked him, I said, hey, when you lived there, did any weird things ever happen to you? And he didn't go into detail, but he said, oh, yeah. He said, we constantly had like weird spiritual type things happening to us. And he said that happened the entire time he lived there until Grandpa Gary died.
Wow.
And he
So
said it's kind of like after Gary died, those type of things stopped. So I don't know. You may want to give him a chit chat and see if he can tell you some of his stories.
Yeah, I definitely do. He's on my list to talk to. I know that he watches these videos. So if you're listening, Uncle Sean, please send me a message. We'll get you on an episode. Now, okay, so those were all the big ones in Bethel Island, and then that's when we moved to Oakley shortly after that.
Yeah.
And
we moved to Oakley, and we actually lived there for 22 years. Well, your dad and I did. Obviously, you moved out when you went to college.
Mm-hmm. And did we ever? We did have some odd experiences there, although not quite as vivid or extreme as Bethel Island or Knightson.
Right. So we did continue to have some experiences when we moved to Oakley. A few were when we first moved, and then it kind of tapered off. And again, you kids were growing older. Maybe everybody was a little less open spiritually to that sort of thing. We did start going to church regularly during that time, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but shortly after we moved there and got the house all set up and your guys' new room set up, and you and Nick shared a room at that time, and I believe when we first moved in, your room did not have a ceiling fan in it, but we shortly afterwards put a ceiling fan in there. And again, I remember one night you guys, I think, had just gone to bed and, hadn't fallen asleep yet. You used to like to watch TV and things like that to go to sleep. But I heard you talking, and I said, Ryan, who are you talking to? And you told me you were talking to the people in the fan. And so that, I think that was like my first one when we went to Oakley that I thought, okay, they may have followed us again.
Well, if you listen to Nick's podcast, he talks about he thought there was a troll under the bed. So who knows?
Yeah, and that cracked me up when I heard that, because I don't remember him ever telling me that story.
I had never heard that.
But I do remember I told you as a kid I watched that movie, and it was something Black, Susan Black, or
the Trilogy of Terror.
The Trilogy of Terror, yeah.
Yes.
That had those 3 stories. And the one that scared the crap out of me was that little voodoo doll troll thing. Yes. And it used to poke people with that knife. And
yes.
As a I think I was a young teenager when I saw that. I literally I was scared to death. I mean, I would, from my bedroom door, I would try to leap onto my bed because I was always afraid something was going to come out of the bed. So I don't know if he got that story from me telling that story, or if he really thought there was a little troll under his bed.
I have no idea. But I love that story, because who knows? Maybe it was just Nick being Nick, or maybe there was something else playing tricks on him. Right. Who knows? Right. I probably, with that one, especially with his reaction, I lean toward him just having an imagination. But who knows?
Yep, you never know. I don't, like as I said, because I don't remember anything ever being evil. You know, I never got the evil sense for anything. But I mean, you were definitely convinced that there were little people that, lived in the fan. So it's like, okay, But
yeah.
Then, kind of the things that happened in Oakley is this was more after, the older I became, some of my relatives had passed away. Some of my friends passed away, ones that I was extremely close to.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in Oakley where I had that vivid dream about my friend Cinda, who had passed away. And she was only 30, and she had been born with disabilities. And so she was never really ever supposed to live past the age of 5. So we were very blessed to have 30 years from her. But she definitely came to me in a dream after she passed. And it was literally like one of those things where you see her running through a field of flowers or whatever to greet you, but
Mm-hmm.
had come to me and said, I need you to tell my mom that I'm okay, because my mom is not open to hear this right now. And I've been like trying to send her messages, and she needs to know that I'm okay. And so, literally, that next morning, I called her mom, Jeannie, and we got together and we met for lunch. And I told her, I said, you just need to know that Cinda's okay, So, obviously, still open to spirits, and they come to you at times that you don't expect it. But I felt, very blessed to be the one to be able to tell her mom that she was no longer disabled. She was um, just like healthy and
Mm-hmm.
free, So that was a blessing. And then one time after Aunt Jenny passed away, I remember I was going down our little hall. It was in the evening, so it was dark. And I was going down, we had just that little hallway. And I was going down that hallway, I think, to enter the bedroom or something like that. And I literally felt like that rush of something going through you,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know? And it just kind of took me off guard for a minute. And then the first thing that came to me was Aunt Jenny.
Wow.
And so, I mean, and that was like the first time I'd ever like felt something like literally go through me. And
Right.
I mean, and I totally believe that that's what it was. And again, I don't know, it's not like I didn't get this thing like, hey, Tamara, it's me. Everything's okay. But it was just like this, like a rush of something went through me, and then Aunt Jenny came to mind.
Mm-hmm.
But it did give me peace, because then I felt like, okay, I was extremely close to her. And yeah, it made me feel like she was okay.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I think yeah. I mean, of course, I love stories of ghost stories and stories of the paranormal and weird things. But I mean, stories like that are comforting. You know what I mean? We always focus on the scary aspects,
Right.
but the supernatural and the paranormal is, there's more to it than that. There's a lot of positivity that can come from it. Like you said, visitations and dreams, or just knowing that someone's okay. There's a lot of good that can come from that.
Oh,
But
very true. And they say, like, when you're going about your daily activities and things like that, and then if all of a sudden, like, somebody that's passed or whatnot just enters your mind out of the blue, they say, be open to that. That really is them, trying to connect to you.
yeah, no, absolutely. Um, and I think so. Was the last weird experience you had in Oakley after Grandpa died?
Yeah. So, Grandpa had passed away, and I don't know if it may have been a year. It may have been 2 years. I'm not sure exactly. But Dad was outside working on one of his cars, and I happened to be in the bedroom,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a ceiling fan with lights um, above our bed. And there'd been a light bulb out on that thing for months. And, I was just lazy, hadn't wanted to get up onto the bed to change the light bulb
Right.
because it had like four of them. And so yeah, I was in there like folding laundry and just going about my day. Don't remember that I was thinking anything in particular or whatever. But all of a sudden that light again, and you kind of hear like a clicking, or I don't know if it's like, sometimes when a light bulb first goes on, it does kind of like that flicker and you can kind of hear a noise as the elements connect.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like I'd heard that and literally the light went back on.
Wow.
And this is a light that had been dead, for months. And so, and at that point, it's like Grandpa came to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said, okay, Gary, I know you're here. You're watching over us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew your dad would want to hear that. So I went out to the garage to tell him, hey, this just happened. The light bulb just went on. And I swear it's your dad, And he says to me, he says, that is so weird. He said, I'd been working on this car and I'd been struggling with this one element. And I was trying to figure out, what could be causing it. And he says, I just thought to my dad, I said, Dad, you always used to work on these cars. Give me some sort of insight. What am I doing wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And he said that he could just really feel Grandpa's spirit at that time. Mm-hmm. And so we both knew right then, whether it was your dad calling to Grandpa and asking for his help, that mm-hmm. he came to let us know he was watching, but for some reason he needed to send me that same message.
Right.
And that light bulb stayed on for, again, then like months afterwards, until right. I basically had to change all the bulbs.
And if I remember correctly, didn't Dad pretty much solve whatever issue he was having with the car like right after that?
He did. Yeah. And then it was like kind of like a light bulb clicked in his head. Oh mm-hmm. yeah, I haven't tried this yet, And so for two people, like he's in the garage, I'm in the back bedroom, to almost simultaneously feel that, I don't think anybody can convince us that it wasn't Grandpa Gary there.
Right. No, absolutely. He it's always nice to hear stories of Grandpa Gary making his presence, just because he did die when I was so young. I was what, 6 maybe?
Well, Nick was 2, so you would have been
5 or 6, depending on.
I was gonna say either 4 or 5.
Oh yeah.
If Nick was because Uncle Bob died like on Nick's 2-year birthday, mm-hmm. and then Grandpa Gary died like 6 months after that. So he would have been 2.5 or so, and so yeah, you may have just turned 5. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, actually, yeah, you would have just turned 5 because he officially passed on Father's Day. They never did. They did get his heart to go back, but they never. He never regained consciousness after that. Right. So Father's Day is always like the second weekend of June or whatever, and your and Dad's birthday is always the 1st of June. Right. So yeah, you would have probably just turned 5.
Wow. Well, have you guys had any weird experiences in your new house at all?
Since we've moved up here to Las Molinas, mm-hmm. I haven't really experienced any type of like ghostly type things. Mm-hmm. The only thing that I can recall was as I foster dogs, mm-hmm. and some of the dogs that we foster from the shelter are ill, and so they don't always survive. And one of our dogs, Prissy, had passed away while we had lived in Oakley. And then when we were here in in Las Molinas, one of the dogs, Petey, had gotten sick and passed away. And it was just like a few days after that, and I was emotional, of course. Mm-hmm. And I was out watering, and I was talking to God actually about the dogs and saying, I know they're up there with you and things like that. And I said, just to reassure me, bring me a butterfly. And then I said, no, bring me two butterflies so I know that Prissy and Petey are together. And almost instantaneously, two butterflies came and landed right there in the berry vines that I was watering.
Well, I don't think we can end on a more positive note than that.
Yeah.
So that's
and for several days after that, every time I'd go outside. Now, of course, it was flowers were blooming and all of that, so there were butterflies around. But two butterflies would fly around me, and then I finally we have this one, these two hedges like out front, kind of by the gazebo. Mm-hmm. And they always got big, beautiful flowers on it. And these two butterflies landed on this one with pink flowers, and I literally got a photograph of it. So that I'll always have that in memory. And I do believe that that was God letting me know that the pups were up there and that they were okay.
That's a cool story. Yeah, like I said, it's nice to have stories like that because it shows people that the paranormal, because there's really no other term for it, it's just the extraordinary, I guess you can say, isn't always scary. Right. And that's an important thing. So
we now have to open up our minds and our hearts, and who knows what we can experience by that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Now, for your animal rescues, Animal Rescue Recon, do you have a website people can visit if there's anybody who, doesn't know us who's listening to this and wants to help or donate or anything like that?
Yeah. So the website is actually animalrescuerecon.com.
Okay. Well, that's easy enough.
Yeah. So we tried to keep it all simple, and we just, September was our 8th year anniversary, and to date we've saved over 2,000 dogs. So
holy cow! I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, yeah. If anybody wants to check it out, animalrescuerecon.com. You can go there. You can help out. You can donate. If you're in the area of California, I'm sure you can help foster too if needed.
Absolutely.
So. All right, Mom. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your stories. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Another big thank you to my mom for being on this episode. If you'd like to check out Animal Rescue Recon, you can follow her instructions, or the link to the website is also in the description of this video. If you'd like to help out in another way, you can always subscribe to my channel here at Ryan Tyler Reed. If you like this kind of content, we have all kinds of videos. We have other episodes of the Paranormal Tapes. We also have Fright Films, which is my horror movie review show, and Impromptu Reviews, which is just my kind of everyday movie review. Whatever I've seen, I kind of talk about. So yeah, if you enjoy these types of videos, if you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel. It helps out immensely, and it allows me to keep making videos for you. But that's going to do it for this episode, so please join us next time where we sit back and listen to another of our paranormal tapes. Bye.